welcome you into the Sporting Pod, along with Mauricio Ruiz and Tony Allegretti. I'm Colton Pepper. A lot to get to today, including a big moment in USL Championship history, the first ever over-the-air network broadcast on CBS. The impact that has had and will have moving forward is going to be part of our conversation. I see here on our list of topics to consider somebody, I'm going to guess it was Mauricio.
Don't assume that has gotten you in trouble before.
We know it happens when you assume.
Yes, it angers Tony greatly. There's a pro-rel note here at the bottom of the screen we'll get to here in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you to become a member of Sporting Jacks. Just go to sportingjacks.com, sign up. You get discounts on club merchandise, special invitations to VIP events. There are some that are in the not-too-distant horizon. You also can be entered to win prizes. And also, while you're there, great time to put your season ticket deposits down for the men's and the women's teams as we bring professional soccer back to Jacksonville. And for the first time ever, women's soccer coming to Jacksonville. Just go to sportingjacks.com to become a member.
Can I interrupt before
Please
we get
do.
going?
Yes.
Sorry, yes. I just want to shout out the family with the last name R. They didn't sign up for me to shout them out on the podcast, but they just bought a bunch of season ticket deposits. I get a notice whenever that happens, and it always makes me so happy when I see a family, multiple and both teams.
Nice.
So yeah.
So
anyway, thank you, our family.
The R family.
Is that a family of pirates?
You are great. Yes.
Are you going to enjoy the game?
Anyway,
Not bad, Cole. That was okay.
All right.
As far as dad jokes go, that was pretty good.
I've worked a few in through from time to time. Before we get to the CBS stuff, I do want to talk about, as we are bringing up women's soccer and the first professional women's team of any kind in Jacksonville, some big news for one local soccer star, Sydney Schmidt, who is a star at St. John's Country Day and Jacksonville FC, is on the roster for the U.S. U16 team that are right now, as we record this, in Turkey at the UEFA Friendship Tournament in Riva, Turkey. Runs through a week from Friday. They're in Group A. The U.S. will face the host nation later today as we're recording this. Vietnam on Saturday and Botswana on Tuesday. Brooke Bunton of Clay High School was also in camp earlier this year with U16s, but it's Sydney Schmidt who's on the roster there. And boy, what an exciting opportunity for a young star who has had the spotlight on her for a long time.
And it's someone that we need to keep our eyes on, and just nationally, because talking to a few people that are close to her that have experience of other players from this region that have gone and understand women's soccer really closely, she's the real deal. Mm-hmm. She's the real deal. And myself, I'm part of the U.S. Soccer men's scout of the youth national team, so I understand the process of getting to this point and the recommendations and the scouting network that goes into it and the ID camps. For you to get to where she's at the U16, the levels that she has to go through to even be invited to make the camp, to go on an international trip, to represent the country, they miss on a lot of players that aren't there because the country's just so big and you have limited resources. But the ones that are there are legit.
Yeah, the elite of the elite.
Elite of the elite, right? Yeah. I mean, like, you can't argue for. So it's exciting that there's someone here from, the 904. It's being recognized, at that level.
U16, can you imagine being, 15? I think of 15-year-olds myself, and I was not contemplating playing in Turkey and Botswana. I mean, that's what an actual amazing experience. I'm so happy for her and her family to be able to do that. That's awesome.
Just two comments from me on this. One, I think it was a couple of years ago, I was over at St. John's Country Day doing a story in advance of the girls team playing in a state championship or state Final Four or something, and Mike Pickett, the coach over there, pointed over to the field and said, "Remember that name?" And
right there,
Sydney Schmidt, there she is. Secondly, this is something that I've talked to a lot of people about through the years. The difference in having a conversation or an interview with a soccer player versus, say, a football player or a basketball player is so dramatic, because you can find an NFL first-round pick who maybe has only been on a plane to fly to an away game somewhere, and maybe has not left the Southeast, depending on the way that the team has scheduled, and you don't get that kind of worldliness where any soccer player who is a top youth player coming up will have had the chance to play not only around the United States but around the world in many cases. I remember, I'm going to harken back to a name from the Armada days, Sean Nicklaw, who was had grown up in San Diego, went to school at the University of Connecticut, had played for the Guam national team, and as a result had wound up playing in Iran. And I mean, if you go to the opposite side of the globe, that's where the region was where he was playing.
That's right.
And the kind of exposure you get, it's one of the things I really enjoy about getting to know professional soccer players in particular, but soccer players who have had a chance to have that kind of experience above and beyond just playing in their region in the United States,
or even with their own country. If a few players didn't have the experience because they weren't on a team that traveled abroad, I guarantee you just the knowledge base and the network that they create within their own team.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you there's going to be a couple names in there that you can't pronounce. You don't know where they're from, and they speak a couple different languages. You're going to be like, where are you from? Where are your parents from? And that's just the nature of the game, right? Soccer is probably it is the most universal played game. So even here in Jacksonville, if you never leave the North Florida area, you're going to find people from different places.
That's it, kids. If you want your passport stamped, start playing soccer.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on and talk about this. I think we all watched the first ever network broadcast with Louisville City beating Indy 11 5-3 in a very entertaining match. We made it our match of the week.
It really was.
On the Sporting Jacks report. We were going to do that anyway, probably because of the significance of it, but it certainly was that when you get 8 goals scored. There's plenty to talk about there.
Defending optional.
Optional. Mauricio.
They got the memo to not do a draw 0-0 for sure.
0-0 probably wouldn't have been a way to go. Although, remember that the most watched soccer match broadcast in the United States is the 0-0 between Manchester United and Arsenal the other a couple weeks ago. That's the highest rated game of the year. So 0-0s can still be exciting if there's stakes. That being said, from a rating standpoint, I think the league would have to be extremely pleased that not only the broadcast looked great, I thought the presentation was fantastic, and no major issues from a transmission standpoint or a broadcaster standpoint, anything else, but also that it outdrew the MLS
Trafico
game on Fox that was El Trafico, LAFC, and LA Galaxy, which you would think would be, a showcase game. It is a showcase game in MLS. Doesn't mean necessarily that's always going to happen, but I'd like both of your reflections on what the numbers told you and what kind of an impact you think that will make.
Well, obviously a lot of MLS, homers are watching it on Apple. So it was, it's apples and oranges a bit. That said, they did beat them in network television, right? So that's good when you compare them network to network. The other thing that I just noticed on the list was USL outdrew Everton Newcastle.
Oh,
so which
you would have noticed that, isn't it?
I would have noticed that, and I was definitely one of the unfortunate people to watch that match. But anyway, just well done. The new theme that we broke on this podcast, I'm sure no one heard it before us. Really sang through, and I thought was amazing. And the crowd in Louisville looked really strong.
Well, I mean, as far as a showcase of the league, there's no better place right now, right? And that's what we're trying to create here in Jacksonville, a similar environment, a similar venue that can be attractive. I think the league still at times struggles with the baseball parks. And I think there will be a couple games kind of going because you just can't keep away from it. I think that is a revolution that the league is having. But if you look at that as a staple of where the league is going, and you look at Louisville Stadium and that game and the quality of the game, right? I mean, we talk about being a second division, it was a high quality game.
Yeah, it was.
Right, it was a high quality game. I think it was two teams that was well chosen. Two teams that play an attractive attacking style. So from an entertainment value, it fits. And the broadcast was great. There was a great day. They have a great crowd. So I think it was a great staple of what the league is in certain levels, but where it's going to get to. And teams like us in Jacksonville, Buffalo, Milwaukee, everyone that's kind of coming online, Rhode Island with their stadium, that's the benchmark.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I took away from the broadcast is, as we know, we talked about this previously in terms of the broadcast of the Premier League and what why that is so captivating. The atmosphere was fantastic. They set up cameras in the right spots, or at least had cameras moved to the right spots to catch the fans, and they knew where the supporters groups were, and even there were some shots of the crowd that, not necessarily right in the heart of the supporter section, it looked like families who were really into it, celebrating after goals and that sort of thing, and that was great. And these are two very good franchises as well, who do things the right way. The other thing, that the fact that in concert with this and along the same time, a couple of announcements of national sponsors that were involved with the league that were a part of the broadcast, I think is going to make a difference down the road as well. That now you have a proof of concept, and you can show other advertisers and other potential sponsors, here's what it looks like when we put a game on CBS.
Well, and that's like without giving away the sauce, but giving you a bit of peek behind the scenes of what we do. I mean, we're spending a good amount of our hours and days through, introducing Sporting Jacks to our community, to our business community. We have some digital content, we have some, but when you start kind of getting to that national level, to your point, it hits a different nerve, right? And I think that's when you really start quantifying your partnerships and really bring you huge value, especially the ones that are trying to get out of the market, that are trying to expand more than a Jacksonville brand.
Yeah, it was a very sort of LinkedIn week. We were really riding high with the ratings, but also with the Guardian article and all that. It reminds me when we were doing a Jazz Fest a while ago. If I may digress for a minute.
Digress.
Thank you guys. In La Villa at the home site of James Weldon Johnson, which is now Lift Every Voice and Sing Park, which is undergoing an amazing transformation as we speak.
They just put the roof on the house, by the way. Just drove by the other day. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, the house is looking sweet.
Yeah.
Way back when it was just a patch of grass in a small little park, we were doing a Jazz Fest to really, the main goal was to raise awareness for the song and the brothers. And this was before. Now it's really a huge thing. But back then, I remember Lloyd Washington from Durkeeville and I going out on like the TV circuit, and they were like, well, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? It was like, we're really just trying to raise awareness of the song. That same week, Beyonce sang it at Coachella, and I'm like,
the country music star.
Yeah, exactly, the country music star. And I'm like, Lloyd, we can truly high five now. We've made it, and that's that's the feeling I kind of had this week. Watching that match, I watched it with my mom at her house, and it was just awesome to take in. And it's a new brand of soccer that if you're a soccer head in the United States, it's a kind of product that you haven't really seen yet. Unless you have USL in your city, this is a new thing, and I think it's really fun and interesting.
I will say this, having watched soccer from every big league in Europe, the big five leagues in Europe, and every conceivable league probably in the United States now, having attended games, MLS games and Premier League games and everything else, when you start talking about how different does the product look on the field, just between the lines, there is a gap from the Premier League to MLS. There's no doubt about that. If you want to say Premier League and La Liga, maybe the two highest level overall, depends on the matchups in the Bundesliga or Serie A, and Ligue 1, whatever you want to talk about, those big five leagues. If you have a great matchup, it's going to be a very high level. You see that in the Champions League as well. But there's a drop-off when you watch an MLS game. There just is right now. That gap used to be very large. Now it's not nearly as wide, perhaps. But watching that game, the quality of soccer on the field, Mauricio, I don't know if you have the same thought, but if that had been said, oh, this is the first division American soccer league, you wouldn't have batted an eye at it.
No, and I would actually, and I like your kind of comparison across the leagues, and I think the point that I would like to hone in on, if you watch the Prem and the Championship, the MLS and the USL Championship kind of have the same gap. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where if you watch just the Championship and the teams that are playing in the Championship in England, it's a high-level game. And if that's the only product that you have to watch, that's a good product. And then you're like, oh, okay. It's like watching like The Voice or something. Like, man, those are really good singers. And then the actual singer comes out and sings that song. You're like, oh, okay, there's a difference, right?
Okay.
So watching the championship, you're like, that's a really good game. And then all of a sudden Arsenal rolls in. You're like, oh, okay, that's a different, right? But the gap in between and the entertainment value in between is really close. And if you watch that game between Lou and Indy, the entertainment value was huge. And the gap between, I know this is not an Open Cup conversation, but I'm going to love to see a USL Championship team win the Open Cup, get a spot, an automatic berth in the CONCACAF. Man, and now that's
see what happens,
right? Because then they're going to put all the stock into it, and they're going to be, that year of building it, the players are going to come and salaries, and then you're going to start seeing the gap, right? You're going to start seeing the difference. And I think you're going to be surprised that it's actually not as big. It is. There's a difference, right? We're not trying to say it's equal, but the gap isn't that as big. And on the nature of the soccer game, a 1-0 game, a red card, a rainy day, it changes, and opportunities can come from that.
That's a great point. And there were a lot of USL teams that knocked out MLS teams last year in the Cup. I wonder, and MLS isn't going to put out a B squad. Like, they're not going to want to get knocked out of this tournament by USL.
Yeah, if they're in, they should want to. They want to be in.
So I think it's going to be really interesting because they're going to have less. In fact, because there's only 8 of them in, they're going to have less of a chance to just run the thing like they have been.
And to knock out.
Let's give them
USL
credit.
Teams,
they have been winning them. So it's not like it. I think the last one was Richmond, maybe. But it's going to be really interesting, and I think the year that MLS has kind of been bruised a little bit. I think the year that they're having, they really need to win that tournament, in my mind.
And again, only 18. Some of them are among the clubs we've talked about in the past that have always prioritized that Seattle, Kansas City. Some others who have always found that to be an important tournament to play in. I also want to talk about the exposure and the credibility that comes from the exposure for the league. And hardcore soccer fans, if they have not seen USL Championship play before, got a taste of it, and it was a very good representative sampling of the kind of skill and teams. Lou City always goes deep in the playoffs. Indy has the capacity to do that, certainly. I don't think Indy probably is a title contender probably this year. Lou City is. And
right.
A 5-3 result might be kind of what you would have expected overall. You maybe not expect 8 goals, but the exposure of that and then the credibility that the league got, not only from the soccer on the field, but the presentation as a whole. And I don't know, Mauricio, if you've talked to some folks who are not affiliated with USL teams or the USL who have commented on that, but I do think it brings a certain level of credibility, even though network broadcasts are not what they were 30 years ago. When you only had 4 choices, you had PBS and your three networks. Maybe you had a local independent. Now there are a lot more choices. But when you're on an over-the-air network, it does change the credibility of a league.
It does, and actually, I spoke to members of the staff, on the technical staff on both clubs, for Indy 11 and for Lou City, and they just said the vibe on the day was different, right? Because they knew the game was going to be broadcast, it was going to have a much bigger reach, and there's an excitement in the air. The stadium was full. They did a great job promoting it, so they felt it as well as they were playing, even though they don't see the cameras that we're seeing and the angles that we're seeing. There's an excitement there, and then to your point, I did speak to people outside of the league and non-USL folks, and they just stumbled upon it because maybe they're not all USL followers. Hey, I caught that game. It was a really good game. That's a really great venue. What's happening in the USL? And if you just look at the periphery, the people that are neutral, I mean, I didn't see it. Maybe you did, Tony. You're a little more connected to the dark web kind of pages.
Yes, thank you.
That's where the Everton fan pages are.
That's where the Everton page fans are, yeah. I mean, like the Reddits of the world, like I didn't see much bad, if any at all, about with the broadcast of the game. It was mostly positive.
Let me just take a moment to point out that Mauricio thinks that Reddit is the dark web, but that's we can circle back to that at a later date.
I don't go on it, so I don't know. Maybe that's probably a good thing that I don't go on it.
Probably so at this point.
For the first time, I'm speechless.
That just came out of Mauricio's mouth.
Yeah,
but the credibility, I think, definitely got a boost.
100%. And I again. just am really grateful to be around and humbled that we have a part to do with something that's coming to Jacksonville that will be showcased in this way. We will be on national television live from Jacksonville eventually, and it's like I get goosebumps thinking about it. I did get a mailbag question over the week, and maybe we pivot. Are we good on? Are we?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. So,
and you can send in your questions to sportingpod@sportingjacks.com.
Thank you. And so this was about the women's team, and it was just basically like kind of a blank question was, what do you think that, the appetite in Jacksonville is for the women's game? And this is off of, and I think what he was saying was kind of off of this, the fact that the women's Final Four outdrew the
men's championship game for the first time.
A large amount.
Yeah. And that's just
By
amazing.
the way, side note, if you don't tip off till like 9:30, you're going to lose a lot of the East Coast.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge college basketball fan, and I couldn't stay up.
I was super mad. Like, I'm like 9:04 was right there, right? They
should have been.
Yeah. So and you look at what's happening in Kansas City, and you look at what's happening at Arsenal, and all these places where they're just full of fans. And I think the question was to try to get me to say, yeah, it's going to be like that here. Of course, I have no idea because we've never had it. We've never had a women's team to get behind in this way. And so I'd love to feel like it's just going to be booming, and it's going to be, maybe it'll be as big as the championship, matches that we have. I have no idea. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question.
No, but if you follow the breadcrumbs, right? If you follow the trend of what's happening in women's basketball, and I mean, in college specifically, they've done volleyball in the big stadiums, and then what's happening in the other women's league around the world, as you mentioned. I mean, these are some record numbers, and they're breaking those records every year, right? They're not decade records anymore. They're kind of yearly within a few months records. So we're going to learn a lot in the Super League this year. They launch in 2024 with 8 teams around the country. 25, there's going to be another addition of teams, and then as we come online in 26, with the exposure that we have, with the facilities, with the quality of talent that we have in this city, and the ability to potentially sign homegrown women's soccer players to a professional contract while still having the ability to go to college or bring them after college. I mean, there's a lot of momentum that could happen there. Yeah. And to your point, it's just exciting that it's going to happen.
I'm really hoping it's pent-up demand because, we've had sports in the city for decades and have never had a women's team. It's not even arguable. The best half of the city are women. Like, we've got, 500,000 of them. And they've never really had a professional team to push behind. And I know there's going to be a lot of men supporting it, including myself. But let's blow it out and show that Jacksonville is one of these places where we support everyone.
I think I'm very interested to learn what the Venn diagram looks like of ticket buyers for Sporting Jacks men and Sporting Jacks women. I do think there will be some overlap. My question, and it's a curiosity here, will it be a little sliver, or will it look more like the Eclipse?
Well, the way that we do our deposits right now is it's 25 for a deposit for the men's and 25 for the women's individually, but together it's 40. And because it's a deposit, it's just used towards your total. So it's so the discount's not really a thing, but there are way more people buying those two together. Than separately, even one or the other. So.
Yeah, and obviously once the schedule is out, that will be part. And I will say as well, this is part of the responsibility that we have, all three of us and everybody else associated with Sporting Jacks, to make sure we're doing the outreach and the telling the story. We know where to find sports fans writ large. That's something that I have been dealing with at one level or another since 1996 in Jacksonville. The women's soccer fan specifically is a little bit different because the only sort of metric that you would be able to find by and large is U.S. Women's National Team TV ratings and attendance at those games when they've been held here. And they've been very successful. Yep. A lot of those people will be coming from out of town to see the women's national team, but a lot of them also live here in Jacksonville and wanted to go through the years and watch the national team play. So I don't have the answers. I don't know the answer to this, but I am curious to find out and also influence that as time goes on, and as we get closer to making some announcements about broadcast deals and other things that will be happening in town. That will be a big component of what we're doing and part of that storytelling and making sure that everybody understands what's happening with the women's team.
And if I can predict a future, and I don't know when that is, the similar thing that happens downtown at the baseball grounds where FSU and UF play here in Jacksonville, or UF and Georgia.
always a sellout. Yeah.
If and when, not if, when we bring college women's soccer to the city of Jacksonville, the same momentum that's happening right now, women's basketball, women's soccer in this city, it is hot. And we need to bring in the top in FSU and UF. FSU is typically been the top
FSU
five.
is probably, you can make the case, the best program going right now.
And you bring them here to the city with all this Gator and Knowles fans and alumni that are sitting here.
If only we knew somebody connected in some way to the Florida program that we could tap into.
Well,
I'll look into it. I'll look at Rolodex.
If only we had a big 15,000 capacity stadium that they could play in as well. That might be fun.
That we could, and I don't want to give hints away or tricks away, but that could be the largest women's college soccer game sellout.
Yes, I love it. Manifest.
Start it now.
Love it.
Buy your ticket to Sporting Check.
Become a member. That's where you get all the information. The monthly newsletter, which will become more frequent as time goes on. All right, Mauricio, I'm guessing you typed this in here at the bottom of the page here. The T's on Pro-Rel conversation.
I did, and I just think that it's a relevant question. And after the momentum of the broadcast network that went out, I think there's a lot of questions just going to keep coming up. USL continues to look to differentiate themselves in the American market, but also align with the world market, with world football. And I think that's a relevant conversation that's not going to go away. And I think today the USL is better set up, and the conversation is open to ownerships and to the league that are not denying the need for us to take the next step as we continue to grow in markets, as League One grows. I think that's going to be important for League One to continue to have some stability to it, for our venues to become more stable. But as these kind of factors continue to work in that direction, I just see the USL becoming a pro role. And I'm like, this is not inside information or anything like that. I think you just look at the trends and you just look at the market. It's going to happen. How? I don't know. When? I don't know. But it's any league in the U.S. is going to do it. It's going to be the USL.
I completely agree, and I think it's saying something that we're talking about it because we're coming in at the top, right? Mm-hmm. It would not be awesome to get relegated after paying the franchise fee and doing what we're doing. Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. So having a big 15,000 seat stadium, you do not want to get relegated. So I happen to agree, and I think USL is really well poised to make that happen, but the landscape is changing really fast, and so who knows what it's going to really look like.
And I will tease to a future conversation at some point about whether Pro-Rel might happen first in women's soccer before men's soccer potentially, and why that might be the case. All right, that'll do it for this installment of the Sporting Pod. Again, go to sportingjacks.com to become a member. Put your season tickets deposits down there. $40 for both, $25 for men or women alone. And we will have more information about watch parties coming in the very near future and other big announcements coming down the line. 2024 and the spring and summer of 2024 is going to be a heck of a run if you're a soccer fan in Jacksonville. For Mauricio Ruiz and Tony Allegretti, I'm Cole Pepper. Thanks so much for listening to The Sporting Pod.